1996 was a very important moment for PC gaming. This was the year when many titles appeared that either started major series or helped set the direction for entire genres. On the channel, we went through this year step by step, from the first releases all the way to the very end. In this episode, we're bringing everything together into one chronological journey and going through the whole year once again. Let's begin. Duke Nukem 3D opened our 1996 journey on January 29th, and from the very first minutes, it was clear that this was more than just another shooter. Duke was not a silent hero. He had attitude, one-liners, and a style clearly inspired by action movies. That made him stand out from many other characters of that era. The levels were also a major part of the experience. Instead of abstract mazes, the game placed players in locations that felt more recognizable, like city streets, bars, cinemas, and shops. These areas were full of secrets, alternate paths, and small details that encouraged exploration. Duke Nukem 3D showed that an FPS could have humor, personality, and memorable environments while still delivering fast and satisfying action. It was loud, crude, energetic, and very much a product of its time, but that is exactly why it became so iconic. A few months later, in April, The Settlers 2 arrived on PC, offering a very different kind of strategy experience. Instead of focusing mainly on combat, the game was built around creating a settlement and managing its economy. The heart of the game was its production system. Wood, stone, food, tools, roads, and workers were all connected, and if one part of the system failed, the effects could quickly spread through the entire settlement. That made the game less about quick reactions and more about planning, patience, and observation. A big part of the satisfaction came from watching tiny settlers carry goods, construct buildings, and slowly turn an empty area into a functioning economy. The Settlers 2 stood out because it made growth itself feel rewarding. It was calm on the surface, but underneath, it was a clever and surprisingly complex economic puzzle. By June 22, 1996, PC gaming was ready for a serious technological leap, and Quake delivered exactly that. Full 3D changed the way levels were designed and how combat felt. Environments became more vertical, movement felt more dynamic, and enemies could attack from different angles. The game was fast, aggressive, and unforgiving, with a dark, raw atmosphere that felt very different from the colorful attitude of Duke Nukem 3D. Quake was also hugely important for multiplayer. While the single-player campaign was still a big part of the game, many players discovered that the real excitement came from deathmatches and network play. Quake helped push the FPS genre toward competitive online gaming and showed how much potential there was beyond the campaign. It was technical, brutal, and extremely influential. September 20th brought The Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall, and its scale was almost unbelievable for the time. This was not a small, carefully guided adventure. Daggerfall gave players a massive world filled with towns, dungeons, guilds, quests, and different ways to build a character. You could follow the main story, join factions, explore freely, or simply create your own path through the world. The game did not hold your hand. It gave you tools and expected you to figure things out. Of course, that ambition came with problems. Daggerfall could be confusing, chaotic, and full of bugs, but it was also bold in a way few games were. You can clearly see the foundations of later Elder Scrolls games here: freedom, exploration, character development, and the feeling that the world belongs to the player. At the end of October, the Neverhood gave 1996 one of its strangest and most original PC games. Released on October 31st, it looked completely different from everything around it. Its entire world was made from clay and animated by hand, giving the game a strange, physical charm that still feels unique today. This was a point-and-click adventure with bizarre characters, unusual humor, and a world that felt like a handmade dream. The pace was slower than in action games, and some puzzles required patience, but that was part of the experience. The Neverhood encouraged players to absorb the atmosphere, notice details, and accept the strange logic of its world. It did not try to follow trends or compete with louder genres. Instead, it chose its own artistic path, and that is why it remains so distinctive and memorable. Then, in mid-November, Tomb Raider appeared on PC and showed what the future of 3D adventure games could look like. Released on November 14th, it quickly made Lara Croft one of gaming's most recognizable characters, but the real breakthrough was the way the game used 3D space. The levels were designed like large environmental puzzles, where movement, timing, and observation mattered as much as combat. Players had to judge distances, line up jumps, climb, swim, push objects, and figure out how each location worked. The controls may feel stiff today, but at the time, they gave players the precision needed for this kind of design. Tomb Raider combined exploration, action, platforming, and puzzles into one memorable adventure. It proved that 3D worlds could be more than just arenas. They could become places to explore, understand, and conquer. Only one day after Tomb Raider, Screamer 2 arrived on PC with a completely different kind of energy. This was a fast and accessible racing game focused on speed, momentum, and pure driving fun. Unlike serious racing simulators, Screamer 2 did not ask players to study complex car setups or every technical detail before starting. You simply chose a car, entered a race, and tried to stay ahead. The handling was simple enough to understand quickly, but still exciting once the race started. The tracks were varied, the pace was quick, and the game had a more arcade-like feeling than many realistic racers. Screamer 2 is a good example of how broad PC racing games were becoming in the mid-90s. There was room for hardcore simulations, but also for games that focused on immediate fun and fast action. The next stop in November was Heroes of Might and Magic 2: The Succession Wars, released on November 16th. It quickly became one of those strategy games that could absorb players for hours. The game combined map exploration, castle management, hero development, and tactical battles. Every turn gave you something useful to do: collect resources, recruit creatures, capture mines, learn spells, or prepare for the next fight. That constant feeling of progress created the famous "just one more turn" effect. The game also had a strong fantasy identity, with colorful factions, magical creatures, artifacts, and charming visuals. Heroes of Might and Magic 2 was easy to understand, but full of meaningful decisions. It was not only about winning battles, it was about slowly building power across the map and turning a weak beginning into a strong kingdom. A few days later, FIFA 97 continued EA's football series and marked an important step in its evolution. Released on November 20th, the game moved toward a more three-dimensional presentation, with 3D player models, commentary, and a stronger attempt to make matches feel like a televised sports broadcast. By today's standards, the movement and animations look simple, but at the time, this was part of the transition toward the modern football game. One of the most memorable features was the indoor mode. It changed the rhythm of the match completely, making the gameplay faster, more chaotic, and more direct, with the ball bouncing off the walls and the action rarely stopping. FIFA 97 was not yet a full simulation, but it clearly showed where the series was heading: more atmosphere, more presentation, and a stronger connection to real football. 2 days after FIFA 97, Command & Conquer Red Alert arrived on PC and immediately became one of the most important real-time strategy games of the 1990s. The formula was clear and satisfying: gather resources, build a base, produce units, defend your position, and attack at the right moment. The game was fast, readable, and very well designed, which made it easy to understand but still full of strategic depth. Its alternate history setting gave it a strong identity, while the live-action cutscenes added personality and style. Red Alert also had unforgettable music, especially Hell March, which became one of the most iconic tracks in strategy game history. The game helped define what many players expected from an RTS: clear rules, strong pacing, memorable factions, and battles that felt intense from start to finish. Near the end of November, Alien Trilogy brought the dark atmosphere of the Alien films into the first-person shooter format. Released on November 30th, the game combined elements inspired by Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3, but its strongest feature was tension. The environments were tight, dark, and uncomfortable, filled with corridors, industrial spaces, and enemies that could appear suddenly. The xenomorphs were fast and dangerous, and the limited visibility made every corner feel risky. Compared to some other shooters from the same period, Alien Trilogy felt more nervous and suspense-driven. Weapons like the pulse rifle and flamethrower helped connect the game to the films, while the setting allowed players to step into that dangerous universe themselves. It did not redefine the FPS genre, but it stood out because of its atmosphere and strong use of the source material. As 1996 moved toward its final stretch, NASCAR Racing 2 offered a much more serious racing experience. Compared to something like Screamer 2, this was a completely different approach to the genre. Here, the focus was not arcade speed or instant fun, but simulation, strategy, and control. Success was not only about driving fast. Players had to think about car setup, tire wear, fuel, pit stops, track position, and consistency over the entire race. Every track required a slightly different approach, and small mistakes could slowly cost you positions. NASCAR Racing 2 may not have looked as flashy as more arcade-style racers, but its depth came from realism. It rewarded players who were willing to learn, focus, and respect the details of oval racing. And finally, right at the end of 1996, Diablo arrived on PC and closed the year with one of the most important releases of the decade. Released on December 31st, the game had a simple but incredibly effective idea. Enter the town of Tristram, go down into the dungeon beneath the cathedral, fight monsters, collect loot, return to town, improve your character, and go back down again. The strength of Diablo was how perfectly that loop worked. Every enemy could drop something useful, and every new weapon, piece of armor, ring, or spellbook could make you want to continue playing. The dark atmosphere, haunting music, and feeling of descending deeper into evil gave the game a strong identity. Diablo was easy to understand, but hard to stop playing. It helped define the action RPG formula and started a series that continues to this day. And with these titles, we close the year 1996. All the games that appeared in this episode have already been covered on the channel, so if you want to see them in more detail, make sure to check out the previous videos. And now we can move into 1997, where games like Blood, Carmageddon, Fallout, Age of Empires, and of course the first Grand Theft Auto are waiting for us. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.